Okay, hello everybody. Today we're here in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 in the TBM 930. We have a 134 nautical mile flight from India Alpha Delta, Washington Dulles International to Papa Hotel Lima, Philadelphia International. We're flying with the FedEx livery. I don't know if FedEx has TBMs, but we've got something urgent that needs to get to Philadelphia and I'm going to fly it there. We'll be flying IFR, and I encountered a symbol I didn't know on the IFR map, so we'll talk about what that is and where you can look up that information. So let's hop into the pilot seat and get started. Alright, we'll use the assisted checklist feature of Microsoft Flight Simulator. It will tell you what you need to do verbally on the checklist, and then you have to do it. I like it. It's like having a co-pilot read the checklist while you execute it. The TBM is actually very easy to start up. So you've got a couple things to turn on the overhead, some checks to make sure the landing gear is down, and in no time, you're ready to start it up. So we'll head up to the overhead here and get the starter on for 2 seconds.
Clear. Starter. On 2 seconds then.
There we go.
Throttle.
And now we'll monitor for a good startup. The TBM is a turboprop. It can easily go over the 250 knots that you are limited to when you're flying below 10,000 feet, so it's going to factor into our flight plan, and we'll talk about that when we get to the brief.
Max 870 degrees for 20 seconds /
Okay, this is a fairly short flight for a turboprop, so we're going to head north to the Woolly waypoint, same as if we were flying the Woolly 1 departure. We are not a turbojet, however, so we can't actually fly the Woolly 1 departure, so when you choose your departures, it's important to look at the departure plate and see the limitations for it. Then from Woolly, we're going to go to DuPont VOR via the Victor 214 airway. And that's an important distinction. So there are multiple waypoints between Woolly and DuPont, and it changes direction multiple times, so that's not the same thing as direct. You are following the airway. So you can just say DuPont via Victor 214, and it means stay on 214 until you get to DuPont. Microsoft Flight Simulator, at least in the flight planning screen, does not have the ability to call out airways. You have to put in every individual waypoint. Now if you're flying an airliner, like the Airbus 320 that I've done a couple recent videos for, you can actually call out airways on the FMC, so you can do a via airway, but you can't do it in the flight planner screen, so be aware of that. You'll have to put in the individual waypoints when creating your flight plan. Now there's something interesting about the Victor 214 airway, and that's that it's got this squiggly lightning bolts, or maybe, radio signal graphic that looks like somebody's scratched out the airway, and I hadn't encountered that before, so what does it mean? So you can Google it, but of course the best way is just to go to the FAA's website and bring up their guide to all the symbols that appear on their VFR and IFR maps. So when you go there, you can see that that means that this route is unusable as a nav aid. So if you are going to fly the Victor 214 airway to the DuPont VOR using the actual VOR signal to fly the airway, you're not going to be able to receive the VOR signal for most of it. When you zoom in on the VOR on the map, you can see that there's a note that says the VOR is unusable past a certain difference. Now when you look at the FAA commentary for that symbol, it says that you can still use it if you are RNAV equipped and going from RNAV waypoint to RNAV waypoint, because that's independent of the VOR signal. But if you can only navigate via VOR signal, this is not a flyable airway, so that's important to know. It won't affect us. We are RNAV capable, and we can still fly that leg by going between the GPS waypoints. The next question is what altitude to fly at, and the first answer is an altitude that's above the minimum en route altitude published on the IFR maps for our segments. If you fly below that number, you will crash into something. Now it's pretty low. Most of our segments are 2,000 to 3,000 for the MEA. So how high above that do we fly? We're flying a TBM 930, which can go faster than 250 knots. if I take it above 10,000 feet. You are limited to 250 knots below 10,000 feet by FAA regulations. So it would be nice to go above 10,000 feet to be able to fly at full speed. So I'd like to do that. And then how high above? Well, if we go too high, we're not going to have enough time to climb up, or we're going to spend all of our time climbing and then immediately descending. So my rule of thumb is I'd like a third of the flight to be at cruise altitude. So you can play around with that on the flight planner screen. And I've selected 11,000, which will give me about a third of the flight at cruise altitude level, and will be greater than the 10,000 to enable me to fly faster than 250 knots. So I think that'll be the most efficient altitude and flight speed for this trip. And when we arrive at Philly, we'll be flying the RNAV approach to runway 26. That's their shorter runway that ends by the general aviation parking. So that's the place to be for a TBM 930. Should be pretty straightforward. Let's call and get our clearance. Dulles clearance, FedEx 71 IFR to Philadelphia, ready to copy. Cleared to Philadelphia International, on departure fly heading 011, radar vectors Raza, Woolly, then as filed. Climb and maintain 5,000, expect file 10 minutes after departure. Departure 125.05, squawk 2314, FedEx 71. Taxi and hold short, runway 1, right, via Juliet, Kilo 8, FedEx 71.
Wisconsin 3782, check transponder on.
Ground Air Shuttle 6023, Echo for Delta 8.
Air Shuttle 6023, hold short of Zulu, contact the ramp.
Short Zulu over the ramp, Air Shuttle 60.
3782, monitor tower 134.42.
Brand 055, heavy runway 30, taxi Zulu, Yankee 1180.
Alright, we stopped back a little bit of ways on the taxiway because we have an Airbus ahead of us at the hold short line. So while we're doing that, we'll run through our pre-takeoff checklist.
Auxiliary boost PMP. Auto.
United 1082, those contact the Yankee 7 short of Zulu, contact the ramp.
Dulles Tower, FedEx 71, holding short, runway 1 right. Cleared for takeoff, runway 1 right, FedEx 71.
055, heavy contact, showing departure. Air France 055, heavy contact, coming departure.
Rotate. Alright, we're all set up. Let's sit back and enjoy that awesome scenery. Okay, that was a fun short IFR flight. I really enjoyed the FedEx livery. I'll put the link so that you too can download it. I also learned something, so I enjoy trying new things, and every time I do a flight, I learn something new. So in this case, it was a symbol I hadn't seen before, and it was cool trying to figure out what that was about. So if you enjoy content like this, be sure to leave me a comment, click that like button, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks as always for flying along with me, and stay tuned for further flight adventures.